More time, just to alert folks, someone who's out. Lenore, my dear. Lenore, I see you. Lenore, could you ring the bell, please? Or get someone to? Thank you, Cynthia. All right, thank you all for coming. Did you get the purple packet on your way in? If you did not, we need to figure out a way to get you the purple packet. It's the same packet will be available next week for the congregational meeting. We wanted to get the information into folks' hands. And the fabulous Gillian, who is filling in as our administrator, put each document on a different color of paper to help us be able to talk about them. Nope. No, sorry. That's why I'm making sure to mic. So, it's a small group here, but this is being recorded and also live streamed to YouTube and Facebook. So we do have a lot of questions to answer, and I'm going to do an introduction, then I'll talk about how we're going to do the questions, and We're going to talk through these, and I'm sure there will be people who will view this afterwards. So thank you all so much for being here. So what I wanted to start us with, Here we go, on tube. The yellow sheet. Had to find the color, which is the timeline we've been working from since January. I just wanted to start us off by reminding us once again of the goals of this process, and that's what's at the top of the yellow sheet. To achieve a result that is financially sustainable for the congregation and is mission-oriented. To provide opportunities for members of the congregation to be fully informed on the issues and to express their views and feelings on the issues. To move towards healing the hurt that has been done in the past. To develop a proposal that is acceptable to as many members of the congregation as possible. To discuss the issues openly, transparently, flexibly, and in the spirit of UUCB's Congregational Covenant and UU values. So I wanted to briefly talk through the motion that the board has put on the agenda for next week's meeting and what the goal of that motion was as the board worked on it was to develop a proposal that was acceptable to as many members of the congregation as possible. And it came from the work of the problem solving and brainstorming sessions. It came from some work with Freestone committee chairs. It came from the thoughts and concerns of many, trying to address many concerns and questions that we had. Okay, I was hearing movement behind me. I figured it out. It is just the fabulous Katya. Oh, no worries. So that motion, I believe, is page, let's find it. What color is the motion? Someone help me. It's blue. All right. The blue motion. And what this motion, I'm not going to read through the whole thing because I know y'all are intelligent people and can read it. And for those online, if you will take a look, if you go to the church website and then under community, I think, the community menu, go to the Freestone link. You'll find right up there on the top of that page a link to the folder of documents. And all of the documents in this packet are in that folder, as well as many others. And this particular motion, which is resolution number 22-1, if you're watching online or tuning in later to find in that folder, is what was the board and other leaders were trying to do to attempt to include to develop a proposal that was acceptable to as many members of the congregation as possible. And that's what you're looking at. So one of the concerns that's been stated is there's a lot in it. Is it too complicated? There is a lot in it. It is complicated, but again, it is trying to address as many, the perspectives and questions and concerns of as many members of the church as possible. So to kind of walk you through the resolution, it's a bit complicated. You've got the whereas section, which is essentially the grounding assumptions. And a lot of work went into those as well, and apologies if something didn't get named in there. It was really an attempt that the board and others were making to make it as comprehensive as possible towards the foundational values. And the next section on the back of page 1 is the now therefore. It's when the numbers start. So this is really the meat of the motion. The whereases are like, these are our assumptions as we're going. The meat of the motion is those numbers. The now therefore and the furthermore part. And this is, if the motion passes in this form, in amended form, however it passes, these sections are what the congregation is directing the board to do or delegate. So it's really the meat of it, and as you're looking at it, I wanted to make sure that you understood those pieces. And the furthermore part, which is a phased timeline, milestones, it was developed based on the Don Close's proposal, which he had sent out a while back, and which talked about, when we can look at having, if the congregation says, yes, let's give this a try with this plan for going forward, let's go with this plan, it is the milestone dates that the board decided to say, okay, it's not just we're going to cross our fingers and wish for rainbows. I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. It's trying to include some accountability and at least a plan for if things can't happen as the congregation hopes and as the process needs. So it's the milestones for saying, okay, that these are some things that we're going to just put some deadlines on with action if the deadline can't be met. And there was a lot of flexibility built in here too. There's the creation of the Freestone Oversight Committee, which I believe is detailed. It might be in the next section. No. Oh, there it is, on the green sheet, on the very next page, which is in the additional information to go with the resolution if you're looking at it online. It is the draft charge for the Freestone Oversight Committee, so that you can look at what is being thought of for that. So that's what you're looking at here in your hands. To walk you through the rest of the packet, the purple sheet is simply the agenda for the congregational meeting. Not so important for today, but it'll also be handed out next week. Now you can see what is on the agenda. The pink sheet is the letter that went out from the from the board to the congregation. I really should have a music stand, but let me walk over here. Better. The yellow was the timeline that we just referred to. The blue is the motion. The green is the additional information supporting the motion. And then you have the white sheet with the stuff in yellow that is the parcel map. That is what Freestone is. With the large parcel on 46, that's where the dome is. And 48 and 49 are the other two parcels. And then the last page also on, no, it's slightly beige, is the estimated costs of work needed for the property, which were developed with a lot of work done by the Freestone Committee and Dave Wemmer in particular. All right, so that's what's in the packet, and that's kind of the overall situation as it is. I have a lot of questions on index cards, so here's how I would like to propose that this Q&A session works. I want to be able to get through all those questions. So what we're going to be doing first is focusing on those questions. If you have a question, I'd like to encourage you to write it on an index card. If you like an index card, raise your hand. Dave Roberts, fabulous board member extraordinaire, will bring you an index card if you raise your hand. Please, one question per index card, so if you need more than one, just hold up fingers and Dave will know how many to give you. When you have your question written, hold up the card and Dave will come and be able to get it. Does that make sense? I've seen this trick done in other workshops. It's very efficient. There's a ton of them out there, and I've got a few right here. Yep, here you go. All right, and just any time during, if you raise your hand, Dave will be able to bring you the cards, and then raise that card up, and he'll come and get it up to me. All right, and so I've kind of loosely categorized the questions, and what I'm planning is that I'll read the question, then it'll be handed off to the right person who has expertise, or can answer that question, and then we'll see if other folks with the expertise also need to provide answers. And I'd encourage anyone answering to, right now we're really working on focusing on the information and the answers. There's a lot of information. It's a complex issue. So I encourage you to focus your answers on the questions, if that makes sense. And I might ask a follow-up question if it makes sense to do so. All right, this will come to either Alan or Dave to start us out. One of the big questions and topics that's come up is about acceptable use and permitted uses. So this particular question about the permitted uses, why are we talking to a lawyer? Why aren't we taking our questions directly to the county? So whichever one of you wants to take a stab at that. This is handheld 3 will be what I'm handing around, Charlie.
We have been in communication with the county for quite a while, and we continue that process. Or I have taken the lead on that. We have spoken with the county ombudsman, a senior planner, and the vacation rental staff person about our allowed uses, and in particular also renting it out as a vacation rental. If we wanted to do an Airbnb. So all 3 of those staff members have clearly stated, we can continue to use it the way we have, but if we rent it to ourselves like we have in the past, or if we decided to rent it via like Airbnb, we would have to get a vacation rental permit from the county, and that's a very straightforward thing. But the vacation rental regulations were revised August 2nd, and they now specifically prohibit a corporation, an LLC, and a multi-family ownership from vacation rentals. So we are a corporation. We're a religious or church corporation, so we cannot rent the property to ourselves or outside. So our use going forward with the county would be free use or use with suggested donations. There was concerns and questions from members about wanting to get a more definitive opinion from the county from a more senior level than the level of the 3 people I have been communicating with. So I reached out and went right to the planning director, and the planning director has assigned it to a supervising planning manager, and we had a call with her, with Michelle and a couple others present, kind of giving her the background of the issues and the guidance that we're looking for, and the guidance we've already received from the lower staff, and we're going to get an opinion or a response from her next Thursday, and we've scheduled a Zoom meeting with her to have a follow-up conversation about any questions we have on her guidance. So the county is telling us so far, it is saying, yeah, we can continue to use it. We can't rent it, but we can continue to use it like we have in the past, which is as long as we're consistent with the uses of a single-family dwelling, which is basically how we use it for individuals, a family, or small groups. That's it's consistent with a single-family dwelling. We're okay. That is in conflict with what the attorney is telling us. The attorney is telling us the only use you can have moving forward is to rent it as a long-term rental. Rent it to a family. And then she's saying that all our past uses are a violation, even if we don't collect rent. She says is a violation.
So can I add a few things?
Yes.
Okay. So, and the question specifically, have we talked to the county, which I think is an important one. And Dave has been in communication, and the letter that he sent to the county asking about use is in the Freestone folder, and resulted in this meeting with a senior planner for Sonoma County that happened this past week. She gave us some information on the vacation rentals idea and came back and also took in a lot of information and questions and is going to be getting us some information in writing about what acceptable uses are this week. And many of these things take time. We did manage to get on her calendar for a meeting this Friday afternoon. We'll be asking her if that could be attended by other members of the church. She did not allow the first meeting to be recorded. I don't know if she'll allow it to be. We're going to ask if it could be recorded, if it could be attended by other members, knowing it's 2 days before the congregational meeting. I hope that it can be. Whether it can or not, we will still have, I think the plan is to have whatever guidance we get from her, as well as the written information out ASAP to the congregation, both in the Freestone folder and at least through the discuss list to get the information out quickly. So I know that's a hope with the process. And so you mentioned the meeting with the attorney, which there are some other questions about. And so let's get to that when we get to the questions about the attorney. So Alan, did you have anything you wanted to add to this? Go ahead and come on up here, Alan, so we can get you on camera for YouTube folks. Come on up.
I just wanted to add one very simple factoid, which is during the meeting that Michelle attended, the concept of a donation not directly tied to a rental came up, and it is not defined yet, but given that circumstance, that's a way we can go forward independent of the official rental process.
So there's still questions outstanding, but some of them, as far as donations for being able to stay, those are still being ironed out, and that was something asked of the county planner. So keep the mic, Dave, because next question will have you as well. Okay. You and Tess are for the next questions, or the next question. So we've got the last page, I think, the beige page, or buff, or whatever that color is, in your packet. What if we don't agree with the real estate lady or construction people's cost estimates? Here you go. What if you don't agree with the construction estimates and such, and the repair cost estimates? So could you just talk a little bit, just briefly, about how that was put together, and maybe ambiguity that may be there? And Tess, I want you to weigh in as well.
So the construction cost estimates that I put together, I met with contractors. A couple of contractors gave me estimates. These are not bids. We didn't say we're going to go to construction. I just like to have an estimate. And some of those line items, corroborated pretty well between the two. I also contacted the local Freedmans, which is like a Home Depot, to get pricing on windows and doors and things. And then just my own experience. I'm a licensed civil engineer, so I've been doing estimates as part of my job for my whole career, and I've done like 4 significant home remodel projects. So I have a pretty good feel for it. So the estimates are accurate enough for our decision-making process. If something costs $5,000 and I said it was going to cost $3,000, don't fault me. That's how it is at the early stages. The real estate, so I think we're in the ballpark with costs. Sure that you never know. They could go up 50% if the market goes up with inflation. They could, we may be going into recession. They may go down, 50% if the construction market falls out up there. The real estate, we hired a real estate, no, we didn't hire, they just do it for free. About a year ago to do a cost analysis for the value of the Dome property in parcels 1 and 2. She came back and with a nice report said the Dome property with the Dome as is, not even fixed up, would be like 1.2 million-ish. And selling the 2 raw land lots would be about 300,000. But I called her back a few weeks back saying, what's going on with the market? Interest rates are up. How's that affecting pricing? And she basically said, it's had a big impact. The real estate market, especially for raw land, has really taken a hit. And she wouldn't say, how much the properties were worth now if we went to market, but it would be significantly lower than 300,000. So the market, people are looking for the raw or land that has a working well and has a passing septic system, soil percolation test. And we're raw, so we don't have those. So she says, you know, you're at a disadvantage, and so we don't know. And if we, so if we went to sell those lots and we don't, come up with, enough money to, handle the rehabilitation repairs that we have, that we want to get done. Let's say we need $200,000, and we get $100,000 from the sell the lots. Well, we have a $100,000 deficit, and we have to find a way to, make that up through donations or fundraising. And if we can't, well, then we don't meet our milestone, and we will end up selling.
Tess, can you speak to repair cost ambiguity as well? And then if we want to talk briefly about the real estate, I was going to call Jane Lundeen up, since she had previously met with a real estate agent there. If you're up for that, Jane? Okay.
I'm doing the costs. It's a lot of questions going on.
So this is on the repair costs and ambiguity or disagreement
Right.
about them.
And I've heard there's always a range, and that's why the range is so big. Because one of the things we don't know is that once we get into it and get the permit, because the one thing that has to be done, well, not one thing, the thing we need to do definitely early on is the structural retrofit, and that has to be by a licensed human. Other things can be volunteers as much as possible. We don't know once we open that permit if it's going to do anything else. So all I would add to the thing is probably a contingency, just to be in there, because there's still some the things we don't know don't have a monetary value in there. So what I've seen Tom do often is just like a 20% contingency. I'd be a lot more comfortable if I saw that in there, even for the volunteer thing. So was that it?
I think that was.
Okay.
So to Jane. So I'm inviting Jane to answer, to speak to the real estate question also. Is a number of years back, you'll be able to help me out with how many, she and Don Close met with an agent out at the properties as well.
I think it was early in 2019.
Hold it as close as you can.
I think it was early in 2019, and in terms of real estate, that's about a century. So much has happened, especially with the huge rise in interest rates, that I'm not sure how valuable, in terms of numbers, anything she said would be now. She was much less optimistic than the person you had, saying that there was a ton of vacant land available with utilities, with water and sewer, which our lots don't, the extra lots don't have, as a result of the fires, sadly. Not everybody rebuilds where they were burned out. There were lots available. And she was not encouraging about being able to get anything much out of them. And she also brought up the need for a fire engine turnaround if we were going to continue to use the main parcel. And she produced a much lower estimate, more like, as I remember, $750,000 for the main parcel, and thought that people would look at it as potentially vacant land that nobody would be able to reuse the dome or want to. It wasn't encouraging if what you want to do is keep Freestone.
Thank you, Jane. So one of the questions on, and this is in, I believe, goal number 1, is something that is developing a proposal that is financially, oh, no, Dave, sorry, I'm still on. Dave, you have a question about the driveway. Could you read the question and share with us your thoughts?
What is the current state of the driveway or the access road, and what are the plans for what to do to it? So the current status is the committee. Okay.
I'm collecting the cards.
Oh, sorry. Okay. You're hovering. I'm going, uh-oh. So we rented a piece of grading equipment, and my son, who's an equipment operator, works for a paving contractor, We got out there and we did some vegetation control along the existing road, so we kind of reclaimed the full width of what the road used to be years ago. But the vegetation keeps crept in, so we had like a single lane. So we've pretty much reestablished two-way width for the access road, starting at the chain gate at the house. And so the access road comes down that steep hill, and then you cross the creek. That's a single lane because the creek has a pipe that's only so long. And then you come back up and along this flat straightaway. And so we've improved that so we can get cars to pass, or if emergency vehicles are coming in, people can be leaving. We graded a turnaround for emergency vehicles right opposite where Paco has his trailer. And so we've established that. When you go through the fence gate, that's considered our driveway. Up to our gate, that's called the access road, per county regulations. So there's different requirements for the access road. So we widened it, put a turnaround. So I think we're in pretty good shape. We need to do some vegetation control and kick back some more vegetation. But then once we get into our property, it's a one-way loop. So we don't have the requirement for a two-lane because it's one way. And then we meet the requirements for emergency vehicle turnaround with our big kind of parking area above the dome.
So
Now,
Dave, in the repair cost list, there's a listing for the
Yeah.
driveway. What does that include?
So we've put in about $100,000 because we think it's time to bite the bullet and pave the problematic steep sections of the road that people have trouble with their tires spinning out, and then we get rutted and it just gets worse. And every couple of years we hire the local paving contractor to come in and grade it out and make it smooth again. But it's like a 20% grade, that's why we have the problems with people spinning out and then it gets rutted. So we put in $100,000 for paving the long steep section at the beginning of the access road, and then a portion of our driveway. When you come around and you come up to the dome, there's that. So I had paving from that steep corner up to the dome being paved, and that's like $105,000. And that's from a local contractor that we've been working with to have the ongoing maintenance repairs done.
Thank you. So in the first goal, one of the things talked about is something that is financially sustainable for the congregation. And there were a number of questions around that, and I'm going to hand it over to Tess, who has, I think, 4 of those questions in your hand. So I will hand you the mic, my dear.
I'm definitely going to need a podium for this.
Let me go get you one.
Okay, wherever you want to put me. So I tried to run as many reports as I possibly could, because I've gotten a lot of these questions, and they range to be very specific. Where I get my numbers is directly from our financial system. So there's monies that has been paid, the checks have been written, or the checks have been received, all the things. Thank you. I'd rather go in the middle. Thank you. So the first question, how much money has Freestone made in the past? They sound like such simple questions. So one of the reports I did was specific to just rentals. I'm going to look super smooth trying to go through 20 pieces of paper right now. And I ran it year over year since Freestone got its occupancy permit, which was 2005. And this is an uncomplicated number. That's kind of an important distinction for me, because there will be a couple that actually have more complicated discussions. I could have made this font bigger. Okay. So the highest earning year for Freestone, just rentals, so this doesn't include any kind of fundraising or direct contributions or anything like that, just rentals, The highest year was 2010, where it brought in $10,240 that year. So grand total, it looks like the first year any money came in from rentals was in 2007. This system wasn't implemented until then, so 2005 and 6 may have numbers I don't have. But 2007 has 2605 as the receipt, and since its inception, obviously no money has been received in rentals since 2016, when it was shut down. The total raised has been $42,343. That's since 2007. I'll say 2007 because that's where my numbers start. I also have special projects donations, bequest income, events and fundraising, and other revenue. There we go. So I don't have that one year over year, but we have a grand total of, this is way up, this is to current, this is to the end of September. Not counting rentals, of $19,415. So that's the everything else category. Okay, so that's income. Can she get a index card? Nori wants an index card. Thank you, Dave. Oh boy. Do I get to pick? Okay. Specific bill questions. How much is insurance, utilities, and property taxes? This is an interesting list. So when I first came on board, it was explained to me that the Freestone Committee covers, via rentals, donations, however, property taxes, utilities, and repairs. That was the deal. Deborah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because how else the CT explained it to me. It did not cover insurance at the time. The insurance was lumped into the UCB general fund, all the insurance for all the things UCB. We used to have a property in Florida, that was covered. That was apparently many years ago. So,
Why is insurance separate now?
oh, yes, thank you. Actually brought the bill with me. So last year, we had a tour of our insurance company who came to Freestone with Don Close, pointed out some things that they thought would make it more fire safe. And the Freestone Committee, and they had work parties, and they did all the things that the insurance company asked us to do to make it more fire safe, and they canceled us anyway. Which I thought was a total jerk move. And the reason was purely zip code. All the Sonoma County fires in 2017 had them cut their risks, and they just cut out certain zip codes. And Freestone was in that zip code. So we were left without insurance for that property. Unfortunately, it didn't lower our rates for this building very much, which was kind of sucky as well. But we were able to secure insurance as a residential home through State Farm. So State Farm, we currently have insurance through them for fire and liability if somebody falls. And that is $201.08 per month. So that's what it was. Before that, our insurance company estimated that it was about $5,000 a year. So if somebody wants to do $5,000 versus $200 and compare it, you're more than welcome. So that's what we used to pay, and that was general fund money. So the $5,000 a year for insurance previously was general fund money because it wasn't part of the agreement. I don't know how that worked out. It's just fact. I'm like the Congressional Budget Office. Like I just analyze stuff and like, here it is. There's the info. Do what you will. Am I speaking too fast again? Am I? Okay, good, because I do that a lot, so please call me on it. So the only dilemma with the insurance is that State Farm, as a residential coverage, does not cover us for certain things that could happen on the property, including the really ugly ones that are errors and omissions, that are misconduct of any kind. That is not covered under a residential policy. It could be covered under our umbrella policy, but the insurance company explained it to me that since the property is excluded, the things we do on that property are excluded. And it's specifically listed in our policy as an exclusion. We know it's yours, we're not covering it. So little concernsome. Misconduct. Any allegations of misconduct, including sexual harassment, touching a minor, anything like that would be misconduct. Property taxes are $5,400 a year before, oh gosh, that happened too. Due to no fault of anyone's, because we're not using Freestone at all, we lost our religious exemption. Yep. So yeah, this was announced at the Freestone meeting that we were paying a certain amount of property taxes. I met with the county of Sonoma tax assessor up there, and they said, well, you're not using it for religious purposes because you're not using it at all. We lost our tax exemption. So the property taxes used to be $5,000 a year, and they are now $7,000. So that happened. Been a little bit fun. 5,400 versus 7,200, that was the increase. Property taxes, utilities. It's pretty low. Utilities is just basically electricity. We don't have the gas heat up there anymore, so it's just the electricity to run the pump and when people are up there. And then, it runs this like electricity, $900 a year. So there's that question. And I apologize that some are monthly and some are annual, so if we want to do the math, we can. Thank you, Dave. I think that also answers the cost neutral question. That the historically, again, we got to stop everything at 2016 and talk about before that because you can't count it after that. If Freestone is cost neutral, UUCB did not pay anything out of the general fund except staff time and that insurance that was part of our bigger policy. I answered how much money. Oh, and then the staff time question. Staff time, how much staff time has been used to support Freestone historically? And then second question, how much is needed to support options? I'm assuming those are the options on the table. Okay. Historically, everything comes through the church, so mostly from the finance side. Freestone handled all of its own rentals and management and repairs and all the things. It was just put on the calendar. But the finances came through, so donations could still be a tax write-off. So they came through the church, and checks had to be paid out, either reimbursement or directly to contractors through the church. So that was the staff time that was used to support, was basically the finance side of things and reports and things like that. Again, prior to probably 2014 at that point. And even after that, that was just volunteers increased until it shut down in 2016. So I think that's that. How much is needed to support the proposed options is a darn good question. So I stop at 2016 because my involvement when I started in 2019, I was kind of all in. So I don't count that against anyone. My job is to maximize the use of UUCB, one of my jobs, maximize the use of UUCB assets. And I saw that as an asset. So I went for that. So taking that kind of off the table as an outlier, staff time would still be needed to support the financial transactions regarding Freestone. All the contractors, all the things like that, so check writing, bill pay, it's all done online. And the Freestone committee and potentially the oversight group would still be doing the majority of finding the contractors, writing the, figuring out the proposals, choosing the vendors. We just write the checks. That's the theory. Did I do it? Thank you so much. So we would be continuing the financial support. There would be probably a small increase in the financial support because there would be more going on, but it would be finite until there was a certain level or milestones achieved. But it would always be supported. It's an asset of UUCB is an asset of UUCB. We do that. That's what we do. And that goes for any option. Something has to come through the church. I have to be involved. But I don't know how to give hours to that, but mostly on the finance side, which is one of my hats. Oh, is this related? If we resume use, will we be able to get religious exemption for property taxes? Ooh, good question. If we resume it for religious purposes, we could get our religious exemption back. That is tied up in the use conversation. So we got religious exemption before because we had men's group, mystery, youth camp, the things that are associated with UCB. If it's individuals going up for other things, I don't know that I can make a case for that. So I don't know if we get the religious exemption back. Not hopeful. I try, because that's what I do. Is there anything else for me?
One more money question.
One more money. How do you which one? The religious exemption?
Our proposed use moving forward is like we have in the past, where we would have those groups. You painted it as if like that would be unlikely or something, but we would have, chalice groups, the youth group, the pagans, the whatever, would go up there. And yeah, the whole purpose is to make it used by as many church members as possible. Sure, there might be an individual. I might go up there on a Wednesday night and say, just myself, I'll do a little meditation and listen to the owls, but yeah. So, yeah.
And again, I think we're going to be talking about the uses going forward. How do you include a donation of paying for a road refurbish 1 year and other in-kind donations? How do we include a donation? There is a code for in-kind donations. So from the financial perspective, if somebody does like the estimate is volunteer work, it would be listed as an in-kind donation. It does not look like those have been listed in the past, just like they haven't been listed for UUCB proper headquarters. So those could be counted. There has been a lot of work parties, a lot of building, tons of stuff that has gone up there. The only thing that's been tracked through our office is the materials and the reimbursements that have happened. So if there are in-kind donations, they have not been included. Please know that I have witnessed many, many thousands of dollars in time and effort being donated to Freestone. Does that answer it? Okay, cool. Did I catch everything?
I think so. I wanted to hand the next two questions to Alan.
Okay. So I'm going to address the next two questions. Can we get a guarantee from the Sonoma County Planning Zoning Department that our customary uses of Freestone are allowable, legal, not subject to code violations? So the way I would answer that question would be the following. According to what we understand, the planning department and the code violation department are different. And the planning department has essentially said to us, within the constraints of past use and our current use, we are not in violation as long as we do not violate the rules of the zoning. The zoning is very specific that it's a single-family residential dwelling, which means, in essence, that we have a broad latitude of use. However, we cannot do things that would be considered in violation of that, such as any neighbor complaint about nuisances, of violations of zoning, and so on, we cannot do. But that definition, I think, is pretty clear that whereas we can operate under what the planning department tells us we can do, there is always the risk that the code enforcement will cite us for some violation. However, all property owners suffer under such risk. Second question. If our uses of Freestone property are not officially explicitly approved as legal in compliance with our zoning, will our liability insurance remain in effect and protect us? There's a very simple answer to that question. What we do is we go to our insurance company, we describe our uses and ask for some written definition if that is acceptable or not. And that is what we intend to do. I'm going to hand it off to David to provide further clarification on the second question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, going to the insurance company and engaging them in the conversation is probably the best way. I mean, we, you know, we can the planning people can, you know, give us their opinion. We can go to the code enforcement, and we might suggest going to code enforcement after we get this pending opinion from planning and get their buy-in. But I think ultimately, you know, to get peace of mind, we go to our insurance company with you know, the documentation from the county, and then we also have our attorney opinion. So we should lay that out on the table and get a you know, a written acknowledgement or concurrence that, you know, the uses we're laying out is going to be covered by the current policy. Yeah. Yeah, but you know, insurance companies, you know, we haven't had any claims in the past. That's true, but you know, moving forward, you know, there's a lot more, I think, concern with people about you know, what are our liabilities. And on the fact about liabilities, we also are, the committee is recommending, and other congregants are recommending that we set up a new and separate religious corporation for the Freestone property, so that would shield the main UUCB corporation from liabilities. So if we had some kind of a catastrophic event, you know, they cannot go after the church. They would go after that separate corporate entity, and that would limit our, you know, big liabilities and protect the main campus.
And a little known piece of trivia about Tess, I was a licensed insurance agent in the state of California for many years. And I think that the one thing we would all agree on is that we need to absolutely confirm that within the zoning requirements, because insurance companies don't like to pay bills or claims. So we'd have to make sure we were in compliance, because if we were out, they'd be like, we don't cover people who are committing a crime. So that's definitely would be on top of the list. Oh, history. Okay. We'll stick with Sonoma County for a minute. What is your experience working with Sonoma County? Well, maybe everybody can take this one. In 2019, I met the ombudsman for Sonoma County Permit Center, Brian Kiefer. Wonderful guy. He explained very clear to me that the purpose of the permit center was to give permits, that they wanted people to be able to use the property how they wanted to use it. We want to help you get a permit. He was a very, very helpful human. I was more trying to remember my years. He came into the play a little bit later than that, so I got my years mixed up. So in 2021, where we were trying to figure out what we could and couldn't do in there and go through it. And I do have it with me. I do have the approved uses for the AR zoning code, which is the Freestone property. So this is directly from the Sonoma County website. Agricultural residential. So if we want to raise chickens, we don't need a permit. Bees, fine. Pot, we want to run a cannabis farm, totally legal. Yeah, totally. So we have this column here, and it has a list of permitted uses. Just straight up go for it. And then it has an indicator that is a C, and that is a conditional use, meaning you have to have a permit. So the P's and the C's are on here if that interests anybody, and I can also give the website so you can delve deeper into this. Some pretty random stuff if you ask me, but we do have that. And the first blush of the lawyer conversation prior to anybody else getting involved was the way Sonoma County works is that if it's not expressly listed as permitted, it best be a conversation. Don't take that risk. It best be a conversation, and it may be a permit, it may be a zoning, a rezoning situation, something like that. But if it's not expressly permitted, get a permit, is the math. So my experience with Sonoma County overall is positive until we got our code violation. Once we got our code violation, it's beyond, it's an understatement to say I was persona non grata in Sonoma County. So tax assessor, kind, really good to work with, brought extra people up there to say, hey, if you do need to comply with ADA, call us first. Or if you're going to do an improvement or get a permit for something, call us first. We'll tell you if there's a hidden something you don't know about. Super kind, wonderful people. Same with the permit center I found later. Code enforcement made me cry. I am not exaggerating. They were mean. I talked to 4 people in code enforcement. They didn't care what the other departments said. I specifically had, and this is one of the other questions, I specifically pursued a rental agreement, lease agreement up there with the understanding that I had a piece of paper in my hand from the tax assessor's office that said that we were zoned for tax purposes as a Boy Scout camp. It had Boy Scout camp right on there. And I'm like, that's just like a tracker's camp. That's fine. Guess what? The tax assessor and the zoning department don't talk to each other. And the code enforcement didn't give a care what the tax assessor said. We got a violation. And trying to get conversations out of them was not fun.
Tess, could you
Yes.
talk a little bit about the story of how that violation happened, what triggered it, and what has happened since relating
Sure.
to it?
So that was my motivation for pursuing this and thinking it was going to be legal in the first place. And I worked with the Freestone committee, and they knew what was going on, and Dawn was invaluable in getting it all going and clearing land. They went up there, this is Trackers Earth, and they went up there and had their own work parties, and they eradicated as much poison oak as they could find. And they had huge piles of brush that we, helped to get rid of and chip and everything. I think I've made a total of at least 3 loads out of Freestone with my own truck of just garbage and debris or green waste. There's my story. So they worked really hard to get that up there, and we signed a lease agreement with them to use our property as a summer camp for kids, a day camp, so that people would, drop kids off and they go home at night. No overnights. I think we were talking about overnights at the beginning, but that was too complicated. I personally think that a lot of the problem came up because of COVID, like everything else on the planet. Normally, Trackers Earth has all of the people in the Bay Area that are their clients, and they were also expanding to Sonoma, drop their kids off at a single location, a central location, and you will have noticed the buses that are in our parking lot. We were the central location for this summer. So they would drop their kids off. Licensed Trackers bus drivers would put them all in a bus and drive them to the location. They go all over the Bay Area. And so they would have done this up to Freestone. It would have been a bus or 2, short bus. Big bus is not advisable up there yet. And they would go up there and they would have their camp and they would bring them home. The parents would pick them up back up here. Because of COVID, they could not use buses. They could not put a bunch of kids on one bus. So every single parent had to drive up there individually. That created a traffic line that stretched for half a mile on the main road. They sent me pictures. So the neighbors got livid that we were wrapping around, and it's a skinny road, all of them are. And so they called code enforcement and they complained about us. And code enforcement came out and said, you're not zoned and you're not permitted for a camp, shut it down. So the camp lasted 3 weeks and then we shut it down. The time period in that 3 weeks is when I was talking to code enforcement and trying to see if there was a way we could keep it open. If there was any way on earth we could keep it open. And I consider myself a pretty creative person, and the answer was still no. Not only no, but hell no. Shut it down. Interestingly enough, when we had to shut it down, we had to erase all traces of ever having anything up there. Tents, porta potties, website presence. Trackers had to take it off of their website. We had to take it off of ours. So it was just like erased. So, and we've been told that they do look online to see what we are advertising and doing, especially because now they have our name. So they know to watch us, is where that's at. So we didn't do a darn thing. We took that, we closed the camp. Trackers informed the kids that, refunded their money, the whole bit. Do I get to do the fun one? Well, I've gotten this question multiple times, so I thought I would address it because I'm not a fan of rumors. I want to be straight up. All right, briefly. I can do briefly. Guess what? In the middle of all of this, one of the Tracker staff got arrested. Yep. On Freestone property. Had nothing to do with us. One of the Tracker staff was arrested. And that, speak slower. I'm sorry, I was so upset when it happened. All right, I'm going to risk this. Hold on.
You don't have to, because staff are not required to as part of their job.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Yeah.
An employee that works for Trackers Earth was arrested while working on Freestone property. The reason he was arrested was on suspicion of possessing child pornography. Let that sink in. And by law, they had to immediately intervene and take him off site. No one ever reported on the conclusion of that situation, which is upsetting to me because I knew him and his life is destroyed. He was released in 3 hours after the arrest, and no charges were ever filed. No children were reported as harmed. Everything just went away, except for his life. So, please know that the end of that story is that no charges were filed, no children were ever harmed, and he was out in 3 hours from Sonoma County. So, that's the part that's missing. So I wanted everybody to know that. I think that's it.
Okay. So 2 other questions. I want to take a stab at them, and then I'll invite Dave, Alan, or Don, who've been in conversations with Sonoma County, and whoever else might be relevant for these 2 questions. So, and I want to go ahead and do both, and then I'll pass it off. So the first question, is it not correct that the purpose of the county planning department is to assist property owners like us in making sure our uses are permitted and they work with the enforcement division? So the planning department and the code enforcement division are 2 separate divisions in Sonoma County. And this is from my understanding from having met with a senior planner this past week, along with Don, Alan, and Dave. That's what we were talking about earlier. And they're 2 separate divisions, and when the code enforcement is working to investigate a violation, they will have informational support from the planning department. And the planning department's purpose is to help property owners like us to figure out what our allowable uses are and to assist with permitting processes when needed. So that's why we're in conversation with them. Question 2, and then like I said, I'll turn it over. What did the attorney say about insurance coverage of use not included in zoning? There might be a few words missing in here. So I will say the conversation with Tina Wallace, the Sonoma County real estate attorney, which was on Thursday, was recorded. And it was structured to be a conversation between me and her. This was her request in order to do the conversation. So many folks sent me questions in advance, and many were sending questions during the conversation. It was a 1-hour conversation, a little bit less than an hour, actually, by the time we got started. And it was the agreement for the conversation to occur. If it hadn't been that structure, we wouldn't have been able to have the conversation with her. So if there are questions, I was actually asking the questions of church members of Tina in that conversation. And there will be watch parties, if you want to call them that, 5 of them this coming week, where you can view the conversation and then we'll have a discussion afterwards. So those, I believe, were in the week ahead and the email that went out on Friday. So what did the attorney say about insurance coverage regarding use not included in zoning? So I do encourage you to listen to the whole conversation with her and the discussion afterwards. She works with people once they are experiencing the litigation around a code violation, and so that is her perspective. And so her job was to really help us be aware of whatever risks there are. And one of the risks that is potentially possible, again, I'm going to hand it off to others to weigh in as well, is insurance saying, nope, we don't want it because it doesn't quite fit what you are. It's one of the what MOs of insurance companies is often, or warranty companies, their job is to make money as well. So that's one of the things that she raised is a risk, is insurance not covering a claim because of whether it fits zoning or use or not. So she did raise that. It was her job to raise risks. And she does talk about that. But I'm going to hand it over to, let's see, you were an insurance something? An insurance something, right? So let me hand it over to Tess and then Dave or Alan as well to just further weigh in on that. I just wanted to kind of answer those two questions. Remember, there were two of them. You can do the insurance one first, though, and then we'll hand it over.
Yeah, it's insurance jargon. It's very deep. As long as if there's a loophole we're in, they don't want to pay the claim or insurance, they will exploit that. And at that point, you just involve the lawyers and go after them. So anybody who's been in an insurance situation where you're trying to make a claim, I think you can probably go from your own experience about how fun and supportive the insurance company is. But we would definitely pursue it to the full limits of the policy, regardless of any reticence on their part to actually pay a claim. So it's an insurance company; they're out to make money, but we have attorneys too. So that's my best answer.
Yeah, just to go back and talk about the planning and code enforcement, they don't always necessarily work together to resolve an issue. It's those issues that are, I guess, complicated enough, they will get together and collaborate in trying to come to a solution. When things are straightforward, not everything code enforcement does goes over to planning, but I'm thinking it might be a good time now to ask that code enforcement come in and look at our upcoming planning opinion that's going to come next week. And then I just want to say, about the attorney call that we had day before yesterday. I was very frustrated by it because the rules of the meeting were that only 2 UUCB people could converse with the attorney, and primarily it was Michelle fielding the questions and the attorney answering them, and everybody else on the meeting was muted, including me, and I was extremely frustrated because there were so many follow-up questions that I was wanting to be asked so we can get definitive guidance, and I didn't feel
Dave,
that
since you're going to throw me under the bus publicly, I'm going to reply immediately to that. It was advertised that I would be fielding the questions.
Yeah.
Many of your comments were in all caps to me, which is the equivalent of yelling. And
Yes.
it was
Yes.
fully advertised in advance, and it was very frustrating to deal with your comments in that kind of a setting.
Yeah.
And I don't appreciate being thrown under the bus publicly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for this process that people understand that because I wasn't allowed to, and other people had very poignant follow-up questions that weren't being asked, because she was juggling balls of asking and listening. People were chatting in follow-up questions, etc. So I feel like we didn't get to the bottom of the attorney's opinion about what our allowed uses are because we didn't have follow-up questions that would drill in and ask those questions. So I posed one basic question that Michelle said she would submit back to the attorney that I think would be the crux question, which is how come the attorney says we can rent out the house long-term rental as a single-family dwelling, but we cannot use it ourselves as we have traditionally for overnight stays, weekend stays. We cannot. That's a violation, she says. And that's like the crux question, and it's unanswered in my mind. So I'm hoping that that question will go to the attorney, we'll get, a written answer, and we'll have, and maybe the attorney could come back and, give us the reasons because, you're a church, because this, ABC. I'm fine, I'm happy with that, but, I've been wanting to follow up with the attorney. I've written, a letter to the attorney questioning the previous report, and that was put on hold because we ran out of money. And then we have this phone call. I can't ask questions. So I really feel frustrated that we have unfinished business with the attorney to get a clear understanding.
Yes, it was the dialogue, the way, yeah, so, and we got a bunch more cards, so I do want to be able to move on to those. No, the structure that, if it was a Q&A from everyone asking her, she declined that, hosting that meeting. The way that we got her to agree to the meeting in the first place was by structuring it, so it was just a conversation with one person. So she would not have agreed to the meeting otherwise. That's why that structure was there.
Well, it would have been nice if we were going to have two people. It would have been nice if it was you and me, and instead of
Her
you
and
and
me.
Tess.
Tina and myself,
Yeah.
those two people. So not,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so I'd like to move on to other questions. Yes, thank you. All right, so these next two questions are about many of the other paths and options for Freestone, which I will say during the problem solving and during all of these conversations about Freestone, there have been a lot of really good creative ideas put forward, and these two are a couple of them. So can we include other UU groups and interfaith groups to meet there? It's a really good creative idea, and many of these ideas, I expect that if it is the congregation's will to move forward with Freestone with the plan and the milestones and deadlines incorporated, that there will be the opportunity to explore many of these kinds of things. So another question, and this is simply another possibility that was floated. What is the possibility of adding to the resolution an authorization and direction to the board to investigate donating Freestone to an indigenous land trust? So initially on just what is the possibility of adding to the resolution? So the resolution was already moved by the board. So the resolution as it is being presented at the congregational meeting. Amendments can be proposed at the meeting, and there is in the Freestone document folder, and I believe it was also linked in the email that went out to the congregation, an explanation of how to think about amendments. Apparently Tess has copies, so that's a big question though, but that's the members, you as voting members of UUCB have the power to propose amendments, changes, additions, deletions of things to the motion. And there are some, I believe, who already have or have at least indicated they will be proposing them at the meeting. They cannot be proposed ahead of the meeting, but at the congregational meeting, voting members can propose those. So are you raising your hand for that, Alan? Only very briefly, I've got a lot of cards.
I just wanted to say that the Freestone Committee, if we move forward with a resolution, it allows the committee and the church the flexibility to look seriously at all the issues that you raised and other possibilities such as conservation easements, working with Great Rancheria, which is the local indigenous group, and other possibilities. And we will explore vigorously all of them.
And I think, Alan, that actually speaks to another question that I am holding on the flexibility and exploring multiple options. Will it be necessary to sell both properties so we can have the funds and commit to building both phases? What if we don't sell both, I'm guessing, of the other parcels? So do you want to take that one briefly, Alan? Why don't you read the question again to folks? Here, it's the blue one.
Will it be necessary to sell both properties so we can have the funds and the commitment to build both phases of the construction if we don't, and what if we don't sell both properties? I think that I would answer that question in 3 parts. First of all, the proposal the board put together gives us gating issues in which we will make decisions about the future of Freestone. If we don't, there are a number of if-thans, such as if we don't get the funds to go through the phases as planned, the facility will be sold. I think, secondly, there are a number of creative options, and this is a very creative, resourceful organization, UUCB, such that we will come up with a way of funding the construction regardless of whether we sell the lots. There will be a process forward if we continue to own it.
And if you look at the charge for the Freestone Oversight Committee, one of the things in that charge is to explore different ways of raising funds to do the work needed for Freestone, so it's in there. Is it like immediately about that, Jason? Okay. Just ask, I'll mic it back through. That's a more complicated question and might need some research. Okay. So, okay, Jane and then Ellen, and then I'll get to the next question.
There is some thought, at least with the realtor that we talked to, Don and I, that there was some value to holding on to them because you need to create, she said, this greater turnaround than we had. I don't think you can just assume that they're worthless except for their value to raise a little money. I would not suggest starting by selling them lest you cut off other options you need.
Speaking as somebody who's working on a conservation easement in Texas right now, I can tell you that you can sell the development rights to those 2 parcels should there be endangered species on them. There are 3 types of owls in the neighborhood. If it turns out that we have the spotted owl there, that's an immediate win the sweepstake, 30,000 an acre as an example. So there are lots of other options than just sell the lots. Personally, I'm opposed to selling the lots. I think even if we don't get a conservation easement, if there's a way in which we can create value, I like the idea of owning all the property and keeping it in its natural state.
All right, let me answer the next one, and then we have a fabulous logistical emergency preparedness question that Dave Wimmer is going to take. Will the board's resolution address concerns by providing multiple paths forward, including sale if Freestone can't be used? I'm struggling a little bit with handwriting, so let me see if I got this. Will the board's resolution address concerns by providing multiple paths forward, including sale if we can't use the property? So it's a slightly interpretive question, but I believe the answer is yes. That the board's resolution includes exploring and incorporating a number of different concerns, and with the milestones that are built in, the deadlines that are built in, if the deadlines aren't met, and that especially if getting through phase 1 and the board reopening isn't met, then that is something that could be explored. That's something the Freestone Oversight Committee as well will definitely be taking a look at. So let me turn it over to Dave for a emergency preparedness question.
Is there a landline telephone at Freestone? No, we've never had one there. And the question is, what will it cost to install one? This could be critical in case of emergencies, since all the phone internet towers might be down. And I think that's a good thing for us to look into. I'm also thinking that it would be nice to, I don't know if it'd be via landline or via phones, Wi-Fi service. What am I thinking here? Internet phone to be dialed into the Sonoma County Emergency Center So if they put out an evacuation order, wildfire, et cetera, we would get it via some kind of a landline in there, because typically a lot of those go out to cell phone numbers, and they won't have all our users' cell phones. So I think we need to have something, hardwired or whatever that, it would ring, and somebody pick it up and they'd say, oh, there's an evacuation order, et cetera. Nori? Well, that's a good point, yeah. Yeah, yeah, okay. Well, it's a logistic issue, and we want to explore, the best way to have that. Yeah, that's fine. And Michelle, I want to say, I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus. I wanted people to understand that this latest attorney phone call, to me, was not effective in getting important issues resolved. And now we're going to have watch parties, and people are going to hear what these opinions of the attorney that I think are still unresolved. You have done a fabulous job on this program. Yeah, I was just, maybe it was my misunderstanding that I didn't know that I was going to be muted and not be able to participate directly, being the most knowledgeable person. So that's where my frustration came away. And then I feel like we didn't really improve the situation and get the crux questions answered.
I will say the plan is that those watch parties will have introductions and context and then discussion afterwards. Can I go through these about voting in meetings? Yeah.
Very quickly, I just wanted to say, if you're going to go to a watch party, it would be very helpful to read the committee's response to the original Wallace letter to give you context, because that will really give you the basis for David's frustration. And also, I agree, Michelle, you've done a brilliant job.
All right, so what do we do about members who do not have online access or who are visually disabled, getting documents and printing up and understanding? So members without online access were mailed a copy of the packet for the congregational meeting. That already happened. And if someone reached out with a request for extra accommodations for being visually disabled, I'm confident that we would help them out in every way we possibly could. I don't believe anyone has reached out, but if anyone listening in does have such a need, please reach out and we will help you be able to get access to the documents that you need. Yeah, just call the main office and we will. Okay, well, I've got 4 more. Okay. Will absentee ballots be accepted? Some members will not have access to Zoom or know how to log in, etc. So we've consulted with Stephanie Ann Blythe, who will be our parliamentarian for the meeting. Let me make sure to hold it good and close so you can hear me. And what her assessment was, based on parliamentary procedure, is that what will be happening live at the meeting has to be voted on live at the meeting. So all of the amendments processes that will be discussed is live only, meaning you have to be in the room or on Zoom. If folks are on Zoom, you will have a way of voting on those. The final motion, however, if there are what the board decided in an effort to include as much of the congregation as possible, which I believe was also one of the goals of this process, the board decided that if the number of peoples present at the meeting who there to vote was not at least a third of the congregation, that they would extend voting for the following week for the final motion only. So the amendments and the coming to what the final vote is, that is live only. But if there is not a third of the congregation voting at that meeting, which numbers 108, by the way, is a third as of the numbers of those eligible at the meeting, if that number is not met, then voting will be extended for the following week for the final motion only, with unique ballots have gone out to those who were not at the meeting. Those who are at the meeting will still be able to vote. It will be a written written closed ballot at the meeting. That was already decided by the board. Next question is on proxies. Why don't... At the meeting, the vote on the final motion for those who are present at the meeting will be a written vote. Yes. And that was the board's attempt to enable the vote to be about individual feelings and conclusions and not be affected by peer pressure or publicity for standing and raising hands. So they were simply trying to create the neutral accepting process. Let me get through these couple of questions first. This question about proxies. Are proxies possible? Proxies are used for, not all churches, by the way. Proxies are used for some churches and some nonprofits. Are we willing to let those like Kendra Smith participate? They don't have the ability to come Sunday. We have the Zoom available for folks who can't come on Sundays. As per the current UUCB bylaws, they explicitly exclude the use of proxies. So by the current bylaws, they're excluded. That would be something that could be proposed as a change in the future, but it can't be changed before this meeting. To the point on proxies?
What about people who called in instead of videoed in? Is that...
Or just audio called into the meeting? They'll be accommodated. Yeah, that's something that so Tess, if you could mark, we need to figure that out logistically for Zoom. Yeah, so it isn't necessarily to use a computer. You can phone into Zoom. And it has to be live. No, but you have to be real time. And when phone numbers call into Zoom, they're called in on a phone number. That'll be matched with Breeze to confirm that person's a member. All right, so why not delay the vote so we can get a final definitive guidance on approved land uses from county and attorney? The attorney phone call did not answer critical issues the congregation needs to know for a fair vote. I'd like to take that question myself because it's one of the challenges with this issue and with the overall deciding about Freestone. There are a few challenges, and one of them is that it is the reality that complete definiteness on all questions will probably never be possible, that there will always be some degrees of ambiguities and unknowns. And us human beings don't like that, I know. And I hope that we will have more guidance from the county by Friday, which I know is close. I wish we had it a lot more time before the meeting. But it is possible that a perfectly definitive, we know exactly what we're allowed to do and what the future will hold, will simply never be possible. And one of the reasons the board did not want to delay the vote, because it was discussed either for that or for going till after the election day, as especially for folks who are working on the election, is that they wanted the vote to go ahead and happen. It's been a long process, and frankly, Freestone has been an issue up in the air and creating tension and anxiety for UUCB for many, many years. And in fact, the motion to the congregation is a flip of what the last motion was. The last motion at the last congregational meeting about Freestone was a move to sell the property. This is the complete opposite, and it's a much more complex and reasoned motion. Is that this is the flip of that motion. The affirmative motion is accepting the process to move forward on getting Freestone up and ready for use. So it's an exact flip of that, and the board is fairly confident that we've had a very good in-depth process and wanted to go ahead with the vote. And this is a hard one. The motion before the congregation has a problem. I can't vote against the plan for Freestone without simultaneously voting for selling the property. What if I want to vote against the plan but don't vote to sell? one thing I would encourage you to do is to ask what you don't like about the plan and to propose an amendment that would bring the plan into what you want to see in the plan. For whoever asked this, it's because if there's not a plan for how to move forward with Freestone, it is not possible to keep Freestone. It would just be a vacant property and a liability for the church. What the plan is a solid, viable plan for keeping Freestone, for getting it back able to use again. And keeping a vacant property that is not being used and where the property is degrading because of not having money spent on it is not a healthy choice for the congregation. So I would, if you can't support the plan, the motion and the plan as written, I would encourage you to figure out what might change to help you support it and to propose amendments or to listen to the amendments others and thoughts others might have. So what time is it now, by the way? This is what I get for not wearing a watch. 2:11. We've been here a good while. So I do want to say there was an additional question on a blue card that I was not able to to present an answer here. If that was yours, come up. I will answer it one-on-one. Are there any burning questions right now from anyone? I will actually hand you the mic and let you ask, since we have made it through all of the index cards, which I wanted to prioritize. Lucinda. Inclusion, it's on live stream.
I was just a little confused about the voting process. You had said that, right here? If you could just clarify the voting process, I think you had said people who are present next Sunday, even if we don't have the requisite number, our vote, we still cast our ballot, and that is good. Is that correct?
All right, so quorum is mandatory, and quorum by UUCB's bylaws is 15%, which I believe is 54. So if there are not 54 voting members present next Sunday, the meeting cannot legally happen. So that's quorum. So what we'll be doing next Sunday is then those present at the meeting will be voting on any amendments that are proposed. What will happen at the meeting is that it'll all be opened, the main motion will be moved, and then we'll get into, amendments will start to be proposed and discussed and voted upon one by one. And those present at the meeting, whether here live in the sanctuary, live on Zoom, or live on Zoom via phone, will be able to vote on those amendments. Then, when it comes to the time to vote for the final motion, that will be a written ballot that'll be handed out at the door when you sign in. I proposed trying something new for this meeting. The board said, yeah, let's try this out. You've seen this at other churches. Let's see how it works. Where voting members will be checked in for the meeting. And when you check in, you'll receive your paper ballot, which will be for that final motion. So anyone present at the meeting on Zoom or in person in the sanctuary will go ahead and cast your vote. And since folks will have been checked in, it'll have already been noted this person has cast their vote. If there are not 108 members present at the meeting live, then the board decided they wanted to be able to include more voices to be able to have a greater number. That's a third. And will then, over that next week up till Saturday, there will be online and then I'm imagining very quickly mailed to members who get mail, that final motion only to the members who were not present at the meeting. So if you're present, you'll need to vote that day because that's one of the things facilitated by having folks check in. Does that all make sense? Yeah, the board's trying to do things carefully and make sure to kind of protect the process just for the integrity of the process and the thoughts and opinions of all present.
So if the vote kind of rolls into the following week, people can Zoom vote during that time, and no. And then, but they can ask for a ballot and it'll be mailed to them, and then they vote, and then they have to physically deliver it.
So a ballot will be put together with probably SurveyMonkey and emailed to members who receive email who were not present at the congregational meeting. Yes, that's going to be a process. And for members who do not have email access and have things mailed, we'll have to figure out the exact way they'll be included, but they will also have access to the ballot. Yeah, whether through phone call, hand delivery, something like this. So in order to be able to include all members, because that's an important thing. All right, the group has dwindled. You all are few but mighty. Thank you so much. We'll have tomorrow, so this will be available on YouTube, the recording of this meeting, if you want to see us see our attempted answers to the questions again. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. on Zoom is another Q&A session. We'll include some of the questions from here, but folks will bring their own questions. You are invited to attend that if you wish. It will also be recorded and available on YouTube afterwards on the church YouTube page. All right, any last things before we go? Thank you all so much, and thank you to Dave and Alan for so much of your time and leadership, and to other folks here who've also contributed to Freestone over time as well. Thank you all. And Dave Roberts, thank you for staying and being our board rep who has been staying and supporting as well. Thank you.